Hey y'all, it's Kate from the Little Apothecary and welcome back to my channel.
I am back with episode 10 of my favorite 100 books read on Goodreads. This is the last episode in this video series. I considered doing an honorable mention video, but then I didn't know where to draw the line in all of the honorable mentions, and it would just be forever. The series would never end, and I wouldn't have time for other videos, so I'm drawing the line here. There are a ton of other books that have been left out of this due to timing or my weird rules that I set for myself. Just know that I love all the books, pretty much. But this is the last set of 10 books in this series, so I'm just gonna dive right in. I'm gonna forewarn you guys, my brain is a little bit slow today. I've been fighting a sinus headache on and off today, and the weather is rainy and crappy outside. It's kind of chilly, and I'm just feeling a little bit off weather, so this might be a little bit longer than normal. It might be a little bit slower. I might have a hard time with words a lot today, so just want to give you that forewarning that it might not be as enthusiastic or good as some of the other videos, and I apologize in advance if you think that. First book up is Me by Elton John. This is Elton John's autobiography. It was first released in 2019. This is Elton John's only official autobiography. I'm not sure why Goodreads felt the need to write that, but because they did, I felt the need to include that in my spoiler-free summary of this book. Sir Elton John takes readers through his extraordinary life. From his childhood as a shy kid with Buddy Holly glasses who dreamed of being a pop star, to his meteoric rise to the top of the charts and hearts of fans worldwide. John takes us through the good and the bad, success and rejections, lifelong friendships with John Lennon, Freddie Mercury, and George Michael, and heartbreaks. Falling in love and becoming a father to depression and a gripping drug addiction. Sir Elton John does not hold back in this book. He does not hold back on himself, his actions, or anyone else around him. It's basically a tell-all by Elton John, and I loved it. Why is this one on my list? So many reasons. It's funny, it's honest and gritty and raw. I couldn't stop, and I didn't want to stop reading it, yet I didn't want it to end either. I felt like we got a true sense of who Elton John truly was, or is. And Elton John told the truth no matter what. And this is really important, especially for an artist like Elton John, who is all about the perception. This is such a bold thing to do. He told the truth throughout his whole life. He narrated in this book. Whether it was good or bad, he did not sugarcoat anything. And for an artist that's based on perception and the way people perceive him, this was so important for Elton. So some quotes from this book. There's really no point in asking what if. The only question worth asking is, what's next? Bitter subsequent experience has taught me that if you get carried away and try and smash up a piano by pushing it off stage, you end up looking less like a lawless rock god and more like a furniture removal man having a bad day. The more removed you become from the person you're naturally supposed to be, the harder you're making your life and the less happy you become. And life lessons from Elton John. Next up, we have Imperium by Robert Harris. This is book 1 in the Cicero trilogy. It's historical fiction released in 2006. When Tiro, the confidential secretary and slave of a Roman senator, opens the door to a terrified stranger on a cold November morning, he sets in motion a chain of events that will eventually propel his master into one of the most suspenseful courtroom dramas in history. The stranger at the door is a Sicilian, a victim of the corrupt Roman governor Verri. The senator is Marcus Cicero, an ambitious young lawyer and spellbinding orator, who at the age of 27 is determined to attain Imperium, just supreme power in the state. This book and this whole series is the recreation of Tiro's vanished masterpiece, which was the biography of Cicero. We as readers get to see Cicero interact with legends like Pompey and Caesar and Crassus. Robert Harris lures us into a violent, treacherous world of Roman politics, at once exotically different from, and yet startlingly similar to our own. A world of Senate intrigue and electoral corruption, special prosecutors, and political adventurism, to describe how one clever, compassionate, devious, vulnerable man fought to reach the top. Why is this one on my list? We've got really excellent writing here. And once I was immersed, which took a little bit, to be honest, in this story, but once I was immersed, I was fully immersed. I was in it to win it. And the storytelling in Imperium is by far some of the best storytelling I've ever read. Some quotes from this book. Another of Cicero's maxims was that if you must do something unpopular, you might as well do it wholeheartedly. For in politics, there is no credit to be won by timidity. He lived alone in a small house full of books and did nothing all day except read and think. And to me, that sounds like heaven. It is the nature of things that not all politicians can achieve greatness, and that is such an important lesson to remember. Next book up is Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett. Now, I know some of you out there watching are wondering, where is Terry going to fall in all of this? And a sidebar reminder that none of these books are in any kind of particular order. This is just the favorite 100 books I read on Goodreads. So this isn't really the top 10, and Terry Pratchett is not like 7 on that 10. This is just a random ordering. It's not in any particular ordering, so keep that in mind. And this is books that I've read since I created my Goodreads account, not just in the last year. So we have Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett. This is book 3 in the City Watch series, part of the Discworld universe. It's fantasy, humor, mystery. First released in 1996. There's a werewolf with pre-lunar tensions, and a dwarf with an attitude, and a golem who's begun to think for himself. But that's only the start of Commander Vimes' problems. There's treason in the air and a crime has happened. Vimes has to figure out who done it, how they done it, and what exactly it was. Why is this one on my list? There are a bunch of the City Watch books that are kind of interchangeable for me. I loved them all. Some I loved a little bit more than others, but the ones that I did love more, I loved them equally. So I kind of just picked one of those at random. Terry Pratchett is a brilliant writer. The way that he uses Inkmore, his fictional city, to comment on social and humanity issues is just by far some of the best I have ever seen. His characters are some of my favorites, and the golem that learns to think for himself is one of my favorites of all time. Terry Pratchett uses this golem and golems in general to examine what it means to be alive, to have free will, and how we make decisions as humans. And I love that he uses these fantastical, crazy creatures to examine things like what it means to be alive. Some quotes from this book. Words in the heart cannot be taken. And while it was regarded as pretty good evidence of criminality to be living in a slum, for some reason owning a whole street of them merely got you invited to the very best social occasions. There's lots of people will help you with alcohol business, but there's no one out there arranging little meetings where you can stand up and say, "My name is Sam Vimes and I'm a really suspicious bastard." Just gives you a sense of Terry Pratchett's humor. I love it. Our next book up is The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis. This is historical fiction and contemporary fiction. First released in 1983, so I'm not sure how contemporary it is, but I go with contemporary because it's not one of the old classics. To me, the first time I read this, it felt like a modern classic, and I'll get to that in just a minute. First, a spoiler-free summary. Like I said, released in 1983. When she is sent to an orphanage at the age of 8, Beth Harmon soon discovers 2 ways to escape her surroundings, albeit fleetingly: playing chess and taking the green pills given to her and the other children to keep them subdued. Before long, it becomes apparent that Beth is a chess prodigy. She works her way to the top of the U.S. chess rankings and is able to create a new life for herself. But she can never quite overcome her urge for self-destruction. There is more at stake than just winning and losing for Beth Harmon. Why is this one on my list? Like I said, this one to me, I listened to the audiobook version of this, and to me it felt like an instant classic, a modern classic. I was so intrigued and entranced by every page of this book, every minute of this audiobook. It had great storytelling, great characters, and the audiobook narrator, Amy Landon, for me, made this book even more special. One quote from this book: "It's an entire world of just 64 squares. I feel safe in it. I can control it, I can dominate it, and it's predictable. So if I get hurt, I only have myself to blame." Our next book up is A Sorrow Named Joy by Sarah Chorn. This is a science fiction novella, first released in 2022. Joy desires nothing more than her husband's happiness. She spends her days creating the perfect life for him in their idyllic suburban home. Everything is neat, predictable, and in its place. When Joy finds a picture that hints at a past she can't remember, the facade cracks. As secrets are revealed, Joy realizes her blissful life is crumbling, and to find herself, she must first lose herself. Why is this one on my list? I first read this book for the Sphinx Novella Championship competition, and I fell in love immediately. Sarah Chorn's writing is so deeply emotional, I couldn't help but feel it. It left me thinking about it for days, and I still think about it to this day. It spoke to my soul, directly to my soul. But this is one of those books that I feel like you have to be in the right mindset in order to fully appreciate it. I don't think people just coming in randomly would appreciate it as much as you do if you're in that right mindset. It's a quiet book that makes you think, and those kinds of books you have to be in the right mindset for. And I really appreciated its honest and real relationships that were built in this book. So some quotes from A Sorrow Named Joy. "This was a woman coming undone, and yet fiercely refusing to break. This was strength in its purest form. Giants," Joy realized, "truly did walk this world." And I love that quote. It gives me goosebumps when I read it. Just a couple more books left in this whole series and this video especially. Next up we have When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. This is a nonfiction memoir released in 2016. It's for readers of Atul Gawande, Andrew Solomon, and Anne Lamott. A profoundly moving, exquisitely observed memoir by a young neurosurgeon faced with a terminal cancer diagnosis who attempts to answer the question, what makes a life worth living? At the age of 36, on the verge of completing a decade's worth of training as a neurosurgeon, Paul Kalanithi is diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. One day he was a doctor treating the dying, and the next he was a patient struggling to live. He died in 2015 while writing this book. Why is this one on my list? This book was breathtaking to me. It had such beautiful prose. It was honest and sincere, and it stayed with me forever. Some people said it had some cliches in it, some cliched writing, but I feel like in those moments of our author's life when he's facing down this terminal cancer diagnosis and life and death, sometimes cliches are the only thing that you have. Some quotes from this book. "Human knowledge is never contained in one person. It grows from the relationships we create between each other and the world, and still it is never complete. Science may provide the most useful way to organize empirical, reproducible data, but its power to do so is predicated on its incapability to grasp the most central aspects of human life: hope, fear, love, hate, beauty, envy, honor, weakness, striving, suffering, virtue. If the unexamined life is not worth living, was the unlived life worth examining? And it occurred to me that my relationship with statistics changed as soon as I became one. And if you've ever been in a life-threatening situation or a situation where you become a statistic, you know exactly what that means. Now, next up we have A Wolf in Thief's Clothing by Lily Ann Crow. This is a fantasy novella, another novella I read for the Sphinx Championship series. This was first released in 2022. Frey joins a crew to pull off a dangerous heist. Little do her fellow thieves know that the end of their job is just the beginning of hers. This is a heist gone bad book. We start the novella off with the heist. We don't lead up to the heist, which is very different than a lot of heist novels. Why is this one on my list? Our realistic characters kept me engaged this whole time. Our pacing felt like it was perfect. This is a very short novella, but it felt like it was just the perfect length. And this is part of a larger world or series, but you didn't need to read the rest in order to enjoy and understand this. And I love it when a book, especially a novella, is like that. I want to be able to read just that novella and not have to read the rest of the series in order to understand it. However, this book did make me want to read the rest of the series because I enjoyed the writers reading that much. Next up is a little bit of a cheat in this list. So next up we have A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which I have read many times, and I've seen the iterations of it. The movie versions, the play versions, the TV versions, all of that. But this is an audiobook that I had never listened to before. This is narrated by Tim Curry. Of course, it's fiction, classic, audiobook. Christmas Carol was first released in 1843. However, this audiobook was released in 2010. This version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, masterfully narrated by Tim Curry, puts a unique spin on a treasured classic. Tim Curry performs this timeless holiday story in a deliciously dark tone, returning it to its Dickensian roots with a vivid imagining of Victorian London and just the right touch of outrageous fun. Why is this one on my list? Tim Curry puts the ghost back into this ghost story. This was an experience. And to Dickens himself, this book himself, Dickens' characters are always some of my favorite. He is a master at writing characters, and Tim Curry brought those characters to life in a way I've never seen before. Tim Curry also created this atmosphere of unease. Throughout this whole book, our main character, Scrooge, has a sense of unease, but in some of these lighter retellings of A Christmas Carol, you don't really feel that unease so much. But Tim Curry's narration of this, you feel that unease in every minute of the story. Some quotes. There is nothing in the world so contagious as laughter and good humor. And he was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. Next up, we only have 2 more books left. Next up, we have The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is book 1 in the Diviner series. It's a fantasy, YA, historical fiction, paranormal mystery. It has a lot of things going on, and I love it. Oh, we got to throw in some horror with that too, because there are different horror elements. This was first released in 2012. Something dark and evil has awakened. Evie O'Neill has been exiled from her boring old hometown in Ohio. It's 1926 and New York City is filled with speakeasies, Ziegfeld girls, and rakish pickpockets. The only catch is that she has to live with her Uncle Will and his unhealthy obsession with the occult. Evie worries her uncle will discover her darkest secret, a supernatural power that has only brought her trouble so far. But when the police find a murdered girl branded with a cryptic symbol and Will is called to the scene, Evie realizes that her special talent can possibly help catch a serial killer. We also have a young man named Memphis who's caught between two worlds, a chorus girl named Theta who's running from her past, and she's my favorite character in this book, and a student named Jacob who is hiding a shocking secret. Why is this one on my list? I loved our characters so much in this. These were some of my favorite characters I read last year. The atmosphere is 1920s to a T. She nailed the atmosphere in this book. It's engaging and entertaining writing, and you can tell that Libba Bray did her research for this book, but it's not like beating you over the head with the research. It is entwined with the story and the characters and the atmosphere so well that you can't really tell where the research is and where the story is. And I gotta give props to our audiobook narrator, January Lavoie. I did an immersion read of this, and Lavoie did such a fantastic job of narrating this. She captured our characters perfectly. Some quotes from this book. There is no greater power on this earth than story. People think boundaries and borders build nations. Nonsense. Words do. Beliefs, declarations, constitutions, words. Stories, myths, lies, promises, history. I salute your spunk, but I question your sanity. She knew what it was to wait for someone who would never come home. She knew that grief, like a scar, faded but never really went away. And then our last book on this list and this whole series is Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Queen Bee Olsen. Yes, that is a very long title, often shortened down to Miss Percy or Miss Perky's Pocket Guide. This is book 1 in the Miss Percy series. It's a cozy fantasy, first released in 2021. Miss Mildred Percy inherits a dragon. But first, let's back up. Miss Mildred Percy is a spinster. She does not dance. She has long stopped dreaming, and she certainly does not have adventures. That is, until her great uncle has the audacity to leave her an inheritance that includes a dragon's egg. The egg, as eggs are wont to do, decides to hatch, and Miss Mildred Percy is suddenly thrust out of the role of spinster and general wallflower and into the unprecedented position of spinster and keeper of dragons. This is like Jane Austen meets Lady Trent, and I loved every minute of it. Why is this one on my list? Our characters were so endearing to me. I loved our characters so much. I wanted more of them, and I can't wait to continue this series. This is a unique and endearing story, and it was entertaining from every page of it. Some quotes from this book. It was once a commonly held belief that dragons were nothing more than creatures pocketed into the realm of myth and fairy tale. But man also once believed the earth to be flat, and that we sat with prim and unanswering confidence at the center of the universe. Now it is merely man himself who believes himself to be seated at the center of everything. And how were others to know that beneath her cloak of adept composure there existed a panicked thing, alternately crying and screaming and longing for a nap, and all while craving something glazed in sugar? And now I crave something glazed in sugar. And that is my list of my favorite 100 books I've read on Goodreads. As I said at the beginning, there are a lot that left off. There are a lot because of various rules that I created for myself. I was raised in a world where my older sister created many, many rules and things. And so I have that tendency to create ridiculous rules for myself that leave out a lot. But if I didn't have any rules, this series would go on forever because I just can't choose. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be launching into rereads of all of these books. Well, most of the books. There are a few that I've read recently or reread recently that I won't include in that list. But all the others, or ones I have just read but I want to reread again already, I am going to be rereading that and evaluating if it would be on my list again if I did this again. It also gives me a chance to continue series that I didn't quite get to continue yet. If a book is book 1 in a series, or I haven't read the rest of the series, I'm going to read the entire series in this reread, and that's going to be so much fun and give me a chance to catch up on some series that I really wanted to continue. And I will probably have a separate series of reviews for all of these books that I am rereading. If you want to read any of these books with me, let me know in the comments below. What do you want to read with me and why? And I will try to keep you updated as I make my way through all these books. I'm going to put them on one of my wheel spinners and spin to pick randomly orders of these rereads. So you guys will have to stay tuned to my weekly reading updates to see which ones I'm reading when, and that's that. That's the end of our series of favorite 100 books read on Goodreads. I've read so much more since I started this series, and so there are so many more books that would be added to this, but as I said, I would continue on forever, and I don't plan on doing that. So that's it for now. As always, keep reading, and I love you all to the moon and back. Bye.